and the blood just starts draining from my face. This is my
Um,
freaking job, Emma. This is my job. And I find out from this roundabout way that my boss is going behind my back to try to replace me.
Hey, welcome back, investor. We got another episode of Passive Income Adventures for you here today with Tom Dunkel, self-storage expert. And Tom, thank you so much for coming on the show and tell us about your background, where you come from. I know before we started talking, we were talking about like how to decide if you're ready to invest. And you have a really great idea and some options about teaching people like getting over that hump of being able to invest a little time up front to buy their time back later. So I'm really excited to get into that with you, calling us from just outside of Philly. Just jump
Yep.
into your background, introduce yourself, like tell us about like what is your mission? What do you do and why do you do it?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, Emma, it's great being with you and all the listeners today. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm Tom Dunkel. I'm Chief Investment Officer here at Bel Rose Stewards Group. And you kind of threw a lot of questions at me there, but I'll give a little bit of my background, which will kind of help people understand kind of what my mission is at this point. So I started out after business school in corporate America. I was doing mergers and acquisitions in the aerospace industry, which was amazing. I was surrounded by some incredibly brilliant people, and I was able to learn a lot from them. And then it just kind of continued my corporate career for about 11, 12 years until 2006 when I got fired from my corporate finance job. And it was actually like I think it was the third time in like 4 years that I'd either got laid off or fired or something. So I was like, you know what? This has got to stop, right? Yeah, the old Einstein quote, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results is insanity, right? So I was like, okay, well, this is the kick in the pants I need to actually go out and do what I feel like I'm here to do is do something entrepreneurial. So I had been squirreling away some money along the way. And so when I got fired, it was like, okay, let's go do this. The universe is telling me something here. So I looking around for different entrepreneurial things to do. And I had an interest in real estate all along. And so I was looking at different franchises and this and that. Anyway, end up going into residential fixing and flipping and wholesaling and those kinds of things. I accumulated a rental portfolio. And so I was kind of on my way. And then, of course, a few years later is the great financial crisis, right? And the world is shifting and changing, and I'm hemorrhaging cash, trying to learn, getting killed. And so, anyway, so learned a lot of hard lessons, lost all the money that I'd set aside that I was saving along the way. But it was about that time I started like, hey, I got to find a way to do this. I have a 2 year old and a 4 year old at home. I'm the provider. I got to make something happen here. So I just kept my eyes open and I discovered distressed mortgage notes back then. And so I started buying distressed mortgages, and that business became known as US Mortgage Resolution, connected with my business partner, Joe Downs. We've been at this together since 2010. And so that business has generated now over $54 million of revenue over that time period. And it's allowed us to do some other things. So we've been looking at different asset classes within real estate. We did some hard money lending, which I still do a little bit of that. We have a short term rental portfolio. It was around about 2017, 2018, we started really learning about self storage. And it really checked a lot of the boxes for us as investors. At the end of the day, we're investors, right? So we love resiliency of that asset class. It does well in good times and bad times. It has an extremely low default rate on loans, which of course, as an equity investor, that's a huge benefit and a real gives you great feeling for capital preservation, which is very important. And it's very high cash flowing. It doesn't cost a lot of money to run a self storage facility. So a lot of the cash that comes in ends up dropping to the bottom line, which can be shared with investors. So there's tons of things that we love about self storage. Those are just a couple of highlights. But we bought our first facility in 2020, and now we've acquired 14, soon to be 16. We have two that we're closing here in the next couple weeks. And we put syndications of investors together that tag along with us. We put our own money in the deals and then bring in investor money. And it's been great. And we built up a great team here. We got a great strategy. And we're really excited about where we're at with the self storage industry.
Okay, so I have so many questions. Well, before we go back in time, because there's some things that you said that I'm like, all right, there's a story behind that, right? But
Yeah, oh, yeah.
um First, start me off with like why self-storage? Because I wanted to do self-storage
Mhm.
originally, and we just barely bought our first storage facility, and it doesn't even count because it's an RV park that has like 14 storage units on it that only
Right,
the residents are
right.
using. It's one of those things where I went down that road. I wasn't able to
Mhm.
find a storage deal that was good. And during the process of seeking one, this multifamily fell in my lap. And so I kind of ended up in the multifamily from that. But we had a
Sure.
neighbor of ours. We're at a block party asking, what do you do? And he's like, oh, I develop self storage units. And like, "Oh, that's really interesting." This is probably back in 2010, like, it's been a long time.
Mhm.
And he said something like, "I don't know." You could tell he was getting kind of burned out. "I don't know. It's just like you just get to the point where making money just becomes, like, so easy that it's just not even a challenge anymore." And I remember thinking like and he was looking for
Yep.
a new challenge, and I thought, "Okay, this is where we wanna be." So we wasted a lot of years not knowing what we're doing, not finding something. And when we finally got serious about it, probably by like 2018, 2019. It was so saturated, and we couldn't find a good deal to save our lives. They were all overpriced, and there were so many new ones on the ground. The absorption rate, it was basically we were over the absorption rate, and I just wasn't seeing the data there behind it, yet I still knew so many people who were doing so well in self-storage, and I've always been a little bit like, "What am I missing here?" So, you got into it in
Yep,
2020, the
yep,
height of the saturation.
yep.
Tell us about self-storage, like, why self-storage? Especially since you have other real estate things that are performing.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. It's funny, our stories are pretty similar, Emma, but
Yeah,
except for the fact that I was trying to get into multifamily in, like, the 2017, 2018, 2019 timeframe, and I felt like those deals were really challenging
true.
because there was just so much money flowing into multifamily, and it was during that time when a self-storage deal came across my desk, and back in my corporate life, right, I'm the financial analyst, the Excel spreadsheet nerd, and so that's kind of my thing. And I look at those projections and I do those valuations. And the self storage deal, I was like, oh, wow, this actually looks like it can cash flow and service the debt and have some money left over for the investors. And so that was probably the one of the first things that really caught my eye was just as an example, right? If $100 of rent comes into an apartment building, right? By the time you pay your taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, et cetera, all those operating costs add up to about $65, give or take, maybe 70. And so that only leaves 35 left over to pay your debt and hopefully have something left over for the investors. Self-storage is the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Is $100 of rent comes in. And because, I mean, let's face it, it's a concrete floor, metal box, and a roll up door. There's not a lot going on there as far as the physical plant of a self storage facility. So there's not a lot of expense. So our insurance, taxes, utilities, maintenance, et cetera, only adds up to like maybe 35 $40 on a smaller facility. We can actually get it down to about $30 on a larger facility. Anyway, it leaves us with 60 or $70 to pay our debt. And then, we're typically going to have a nice cash flow left over for our investors. So it's not unusual in self storage for us to be able to pay even in the first year before our value add strategies really kick in. We can pay a 4, 5, 6% cash on cash return to our investors. And then in like year 2 and year 3, after our value add strategies kick in, we can be in the double digits, 10%, 11%, 12% cash on cash paid to our investors. So that's one of the really huge things that we love about self storage is very low operating costs and very high cash flow.
Yeah, you must have been doing this for a while as a finance guy, because what you basically just did there was you explained what an expense ratio is using terms that everyday people can understand. So instead of saying like, oh, 35% expense ratio, 50% expense ratio, where you just sound like you're trying to impress a banker, you're having a conversation with real people and real investors to say like every $100 you bring in, 50 to
Right.
65% of that, $50 to $65 is an
Yep.
expense. In an apartment, yeah, 50 to 60% is if I see it underwritten at a lower expense ratio than that, they better have a really good reason why. It better be brand new
Right.
construction and it better be escalating quickly because by the time the building is 5 or 10 years old, it will be at that 50%. With
Yeah.
self-storage and RV parks and such, it's just much lower.
Yep.
30 to maybe 40% on a smaller one. It
Yep.
makes a big difference, especially on that cash on cash return, and so
Yep.
therefore, I think because of that, more people wanted to enter into the storage market because you are making a higher cash flow in a lot of situations.
Mm.
How do you avoid that overbuild, that low absorption rates?
Yeah, no, it's a critical question, a really good question. And it's something we spend a ton of time doing when we're analyzing an opportunity. We're not just looking at that facility, right? We're looking at that market, that 1, 3, and 5 mile radius around
Hmm.
that location, because we have specific databases for self-storage that we subscribe to, and we subscribe to multiple because not any one database is going to
Yeah.
have the best information. It's not going to have all the information. So yeah, we're looking at what's the competition, how much are they charging for a particular unit size, are how full are there self-storage facilities in the development pipeline, because that's all public information, once the plans are submitted to the municipality. So we're doing those calculations, figuring out the supply index, to throw out the fancy term, which is basically how many square feet of storage is available in that market per person. And depends on the where you are in the country. Some markets use more storage, some markets use less, but generally speaking, it's about $8, or excuse me, 8 square feet per person in a particular area is about equilibrium. So if we do that analysis using these databases and we see that it's like 15 square feet available per person, that gives us a little pause, because that might indicate that market is oversupplied, right? But if it's, 2 or 3 or 4 square feet per person, then that gives us a little bit of an indication like, hey, maybe there's not enough storage in this particular area. And that's going to help drive demand and keep our facility well occupied. But yeah, it's a delicate balance, and there's some science involved, but there's definitely some art involved as well, in terms of determining what is that supply and demand curve situation in that particular market. Because you might be looking at that facility, and then you go down the street 5 or 10 or 15 miles, and it can be completely different. You might have transitioned at that point from a primary market to maybe a secondary market or a tertiary market. And so we do all that kind of analysis, and really do a deep dive to make sure we're in a good market that's going to
Hmm.
support the demand for the facility. And if it's not there, we pass, we move on to the next opportunity.
Yeah, and those rules of thumb are really helpful, but then they tend to go out the window when you're in the specific situation, like where we are.
Mhm.
It's covered in RV parks because
Yeah.
it's fishing, a sport fishing lake. And
Mhm.
so people are living in their RVs either full time or coming in and out, and they want to store their boat or their
Right.
RV or whatever here by the lake. And so the storage here is a massive industry. Whereas normally in a rural area like this, it wouldn't be because people own a lot more land and they can store their boat or their RV on their farm. But here, not only do you
Right.
have people storing their stuff, but people who live here full time in the RVs are using storage at high rates because they live in an RV, even though they're in a rural area. And so, do you
Right.
have those little micro submarket types of things that you only really become aware of when you start drilling down into it? So, and I love the point that you made about how you were looking for multifamily, but it was saturated. You found this self storage in
Mhm.
the reverse situation. I'm like, oh, it's so saturated on self
Yeah.
storage, but it was also saturated on multifamily. I just happened to find a good deal. So that just showed there are
Mhm.
always good deals there. There's always a micro climate or a sub market or a good deal
Sure.
that so how do you find
Totally.
those? How
But
do you
well, it's funny you bring that up, Emma, because the first self-storage facility that we bought in 2020 was listed with a broker, and it had been shopped and shopped and shopped, and nobody bit on it. And ultimately, I think the seller, they had other real estate holdings that they were more focused on. They had kind of run their gamut with self-storage, and this was like the last self-storage facility in their portfolio, so it was kind of forgotten about. But, it was with a broker, and my partner Tim was at the Self Storage Association like executive conference. I mean, it's a boondoggle. I think it was out in like either Aspen or something like that. Anyway, he meets
rough?
the broker out there, and Tim's my partner Tim is located outside of Washington DC in Alexandria, and this facility happened to be in Waldorf, Maryland, which was near where Tim grew up. And so they just got to talking about it, and one thing led to another, and it was turned into like a little gem. We bought it for 1,500,000, and this was our first facility. So we bought it with our own money. And then about 18 months later, we sold it for 2.6 million, and more than doubled our money, more than doubled our
Mm,
equity in a short period of time. So we're like, okay, we like this industry.
yeah.
But yeah, it's just, you got to put yourself in the way of opportunity, right? You kind of create your own luck that way. Get in front of the right people, out there telling your story, kissing a lot of frogs, and ultimately kind of got to go for it at some point or another and not just blindly bid for something, but do your homework and push and prod and see what you can make happen. Cause deals are made, right? They
Yes.
don't just kind of fall in your lap a lot of times. A lot of times you got to actually find one and make it
Mhm.
work.
Sometimes the way you find it can fall in your lap. So, I mean, the first
Mhm.
multifamily we found, it was because I was networking with someone in the self-storage industry and she was getting out of multifamily and really doubling down, going all in on self-storage. And so she
Mhm.
had this apartment building that she wanted to sell. The partners were not functioning well together, a little bit of a divorce, if you might
Mhm.
say. And so I
Yep.
was able to have that, but it came through all of the shaking the trees on the self-storage that
Mhm.
multifamily fell out of it. So it wasn't just like, "Oh, I'm just scrolling along Facebook and somebody like or called me up like, 'Hey, I have a deal for you.'" It doesn't happen that way, but it I felt like fairly lucky to find that deal, but looking
Mhm.
back on it, I was like, yeah, I'd spent a lot of time looking for
Sure.
self-storage and building those relationships, and that's where, that sale came out of. So, how did you turn
Really.
yours into a deal? If it had been picked over and shopped over and it wasn't a deal, what made it a deal in your case? Like, how did you create that deal?
I think we just kind of went the extra level of due diligence in terms of analyzing the market and really looking at the physical facilities. So for as an example, we determined in that particular market that larger units were more desirable. I think because it was more like contractors instead of just more
Mhm.
residential type customers.
Yep.
So when we noticed that like a lot of the 5 by 10 units were vacant for a long period of time, we determined, okay, this market doesn't like 5 by 10s. So what we did is we had multiple units next to each other and we just took out walls. And so
Oh,
it took a 5 by 10 next to a 5 by 10, took out the middle wall. Now we got a 10 by 10. If we took out the next wall after that, now we've got a 10 by 15, which like a contractor that needs to store equipment or materials or whatnot, that's going to be an attractive space for them. So it took a little bit of jockeying and shuffling, like that old tile game that you used to play, to make because we had to move some customers into other units and this and that. But
mhm.
we did that work and we had that level of creativity so that we could make this facility more attractive to that particular market. So it just came down to just rolling up our sleeves and just being a little smarter about how we adjusted the unit mix there.
Oh, I love that game so much. It's like we were building a building downtown and micro units were becoming all the rage. Micro units. We could
Mm,
have 95 micro units in this space. And so what we did
mhm,
is we said, you know what, we're gonna do 1 and 2 bedrooms and we're gonna just tuck the studios and the micros in around as that fits, but we're really gonna focus on the 1 and 2 bedrooms in a downtown setting. And there was so much demand for that because all they could
mm,
find were micros and just understanding this. People would have told us the other way around. Oh no, downtown, everybody wants micros, but just understanding like there's a lack of supply in this
mhm,
particular area, not for housing, but for a particular
mm,
type of housing. So what you're finding there is the same thing where we're kind of jockeying things around. We've had buildings we bought that were vacant and we could go in and blank slate it. Like we can pull out
right,
walls and update this to the modern floor plans. I love that part of the design process of bringing a product to market that really fits your customer base.
right.
So what you just described there, like you're taking out units, you're making it less units. What are you thinking, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Work
exactly.
better because you knew your market.
Totally. Yep. Yeah. So thanks to our ops team that really kind of dug into that particular deal and figured things out.
Yeah, definitely. Deals are made right there. That's a good case in point. So
Deals are made.
so going back a little bit to what you said before, my kids always make jokes. When my husband got laid off the last time, like at the end of 2022, I heard them telling other people and they're like, "Oh, why are you guys moving?" or whatever. And like, "Oh, well, my dad's boss said 2 words that changed our lives forever. You're fired." And he's like, "I didn't get fired. I got laid off." Right? Like
Right. Right.
and so the
Yeah.
fact that you used the word fired, how old were you when that happened? When you lost that job?
Let's see, I was 38.
Okay. So at the point where you're feeling like
Yeah.
you better have your big
Yeah.
boy life figured out, providing for these
Yeah.
little kids, and then you had
Yeah.
this bomb dropped. And tell me about what that did to your level of confidence. Did it fire you up like I better find something else? Or was it like, oh, I'm never gonna be good at what I do and I got fired? And How did you
Here's the story, Emma. It was actually really humiliating, but I'll share it
pick
with
that scab?
everybody out
Sorry.
there. No, 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 no. It took I mean, look, I'm those kinds of things I think happen for a reason, and they turn you into the person you need to be to achieve what you need to achieve or what you want to achieve. So, I mean, look, I've achieved a lot, and so anything bad that happened to me in my past, I'm like, that happened for a reason. So, I'm at work one day at this job, and my phone rings, and it's a friend of mine I hadn't talked to in a while, and he's a headhunter, he's a recruiter. He's like, "Hey, yeah, Tom, what's going on? I haven't talked to you in a while. Blah, blah, blah. Hey, Kev, what's up? How you been? Blah blah blah." He's like, "Hey, I just got this request from your company. I just wanted to get your take on like the company and this and that." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure, whatever." And he's like, "Yeah, so they're looking for a financial analyst, and he's looking for this and he's looking for that, blah blah blah." And the blood just starts draining from my face. This is my
Love your job.
freaking job, Emma. This is my job. And I find out from this roundabout way that my boss is going behind my back to try to replace me.
Oh, boy.
And I find out in this wild way. So I'm like, so I get off, I don't even remember the rest of the conversation because I was so stunned, right? And so I actually confronted my boss, who is the CFO of this publicly traded company. And because we would normally have a little catch up, here's what I'm working on, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
And I said, "Hey, Jim, I got a little bit of a knuckleball here for you." I said, "I got this call the other day from a friend of mine. Are you looking to like replace me?" And he was kind of an awkward, typical kind of financial dude. And he was like, "Well, I think we're looking for some different kind of skill set and blah, blah, blah." And so anyway, he like shared little or to no remorse about the whole thing. But what makes it even funnier is when he hired me a year prior, because I was only there a year, I told him during the interview process, I'm like, "Jim, I don't think I'm the right guy for this job." I mean, my history to that point had been more transactional, right?
Mhm.
And doing deals and raising money and mergers and acquisitions and stuff like that. And this job was more like, "Hey, let's look at the internal operations and run some reports and do some analysis and stuff like that," which I could do, but it wasn't like my real background.
Yeah.
But he kept throwing more money at me and stock options and stuff. So I was like, "Okay."
Yeah.
Then a year later. So anyway, it was pretty humiliating. But again, I think those kinds of things happen for a reason. They, help to thicken my skin and so I could, kind of propel myself to the next level.
Did you come out of that experience like, "I learned a lot. This is not my calling. There are things that I'm better at. Like, let's go kill something else and drag it home." Or did you I mean, there's gotta be a period of self-doubt and recrimination, all of that. How long did that last, and how did you get over it?
You know, I guess when I got fired, on the one hand, of course, it was very humiliating, whatever. But it also, like when I started my entrepreneurial venture, it was very, very scary because I hadn't done it before. But it also felt very natural. It was kind of a strange combination of feelings. And while I was looking around for this next entrepreneurial venture, because I had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old at home, I had to kind of make sure that money was coming in from somewhere. So I
Yeah.
did go on some interviews for some corporate jobs. And man, I had this opportunity that was like amazing. If you had looked at my resume at that point in time and you looked at this opportunity, it was like a perfect match. It was global mergers and acquisitions, pre-IPO company, big private equity backed, tons of money, great people, all this stuff. And I'm in the interview, Emma, and you can just tell in an interview, like when they like you. And
Uh-huh.
I heard this voice in the back of my head saying, "Don't do it. Don't do this. You need to go out and do your own thing, be an entrepreneur."
Oh.
And I was like, "Okay, well, one of 2 things is happening right now. I'm either certifiably insane or I truly am an entrepreneur and I need to go do my own thing." So I get home from the interview. I call the recruiter. I say, "Hey, I'm sorry, but I need you to pull my name from consideration for this position. I got to go do this entrepreneurial thing." And he says, "You're their guy, right?" In other words, the position was mine. Like,
Yeah.
big salary, big bonuses, all this stuff, and I was just like, I know I kind of got that vibe, but I just can't do it. I got to go this other direction. So that was a big pivot point, a big turning point, and it's been a little crazy. And there's certainly a lot of doubt because at that point I hadn't been like a big boss before, and I'm hiring people, building a
Mhm.
team, totally screwed that up, I feel. My first go around trying to do that. But
Y
you either win or you learn, right? So I
Yep.
won a little bit here and there, but I learned a lot. In other words, made a lot of mistakes. But that's now fast forward to today, 18 years later, definitely learned a lot. I still make mistakes all the time, but you just sort of fail forward and
Mhm.
question yourself, but you try to get into those niches where the riches are in the niches, and you get really good at that niche, get the right people together, and really immerse yourself and get yourself educated. I think those are kind of the three kind of key things that I share with people in terms of how to build a successful, sustainable business.
Mm. Okay, so and then you mentioned, like, this sounds like a great story, but you mentioned already earlier that then you lost all your money. So
Yes.
it's like you continue
Yeah.
to learn the hard
Yeah.
lesson. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
turn down this amazing job,
Mhm.
you start
Yeah.
your own thing with, like, the voice of God in the back of your head telling you what
Right.
to do, right? And
Right.
then you proceed to go and lose all your money.
Yeah.
And is that, do I have the right order there? Did I get
Yeah. Oh,
the
yeah.
timeline right? And
Yep.
so then what comes next? How do you recover from that?
Well, it was about that time that I found I was at a real estate networking event here outside Philadelphia, and I just ran into this guy, Joe Downs, and we started talking. Turns out we lived around the corner from each other, and he had just gotten blown up in the commercial real estate industry. I'd gotten
Mm,
blown up in the residential real estate industry. And so there was my house was here, his house was here, and there was a bar right here. So we ended up, hey, let's meet at the bar, stay in touch. What are you up to? This, that, the other thing. And so we met at the bar, and I said, hey, I'm looking at these distressed mortgage notes. And he's like, you're crazy. That's a crazy business, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, hey, you're a smart guy. Why don't you go do your own due diligence, check it out, and we'll meet back here at the bar in a couple weeks and you can tell me what you think. He goes, does his due diligence, goes to a couple conferences in our area that focused on distressed mortgage notes. We meet back at the bar couple weeks later, he says, I think you're onto something. And
yeah.
we literally flipped over a paper placemat in the booth and just started sketching out our business plan for what's today US mortgage resolution. And we were able to cobble together about $12,000 to buy our first 6 loans.
Mhm.
And like I said earlier, now that business has generated over $54 million of revenue. And we've transacted now on over 11, maybe 12,000 loans. And yeah, so just that little bit and being with the right person, right? So Joe's a smart guy. He has different complementary skill set to me. So I think being around those right people and then getting educated. So we
Mm,
started going to the different conferences and stuff for distressed mortgage debts, and which there weren't too many back then. So a lot of what we learned was kind of on the ground, like meeting with real estate attorneys, meeting with bankruptcy attorneys, kind of really the kind of like ground up kind of education. But now over the years, now there's a bunch of conferences that have popped up. But we took that same approach when we got into storage. Hey, let's get educated. Let's build a team. Let's get real clear about what we're trying to do. And then we go buy our first facility. So we put a
mhm.
couple years of planning into self storage before we actually bought our first facility in 2020. So I think that's helped us to accelerate the growth of our self storage business and the sustainability of it too. I think we're building something that's going to be able to survive for the long haul.
So you mentioned the riches and the niches. We hear this one a lot.
Mhm.
You've got this distressed mortgage note business that's when it was started doing well, it was doing well. And then you're like, well, let's go get into commercial real estate. So can you tell us about the niche that you felt like you were really doing well in and be like, well, let's
Yeah.
go find another niche. What does that thought process look like?
Yeah.
Go find a new niche when the one you're in is feeding you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you can't really rest on your laurels in anything, right? So when you're doing well in something, we got our systems down, and like today, Emma, I spend an hour a month on our distressed mortgage debt business, and it pays me like an obnoxious amount of money. So I feel really blessed, but also like, wow, okay. But it's a volatile industry, right? And there's a lot of regulation in the banking and the lending and the notes industry. So it can be really volatile and end up on the wrong side of like some new regulation or something. And so
Mm, mhm,
for years, we knew that business was at risk. And thankfully, at this point, we've definitely had some down periods, some dry periods where just were not a lot of loans transacting. And that was like the lifeblood of our business. So we definitely had some years that were very lean. And so we were searching for a complementary business to help kind of smooth things out. And
Edge.
yeah, hedge, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's how we ended up with storage. And we had tried lending, like I mentioned earlier. We do have a short-term rental portfolio, which hasn't quite worked out the way that we were hoping. It's doing okay. But yeah, but self-storage is something we feel is really on the upswing. I touched on a couple reasons why we like it. This is another one, which is self-storage is becoming more and more adopted, right? So like
Mhm.
millennials, younger generations, they want to be more nimble, right? They don't want the big McMansion. They want the smaller house or apartment, but they still want their toys, right? So they want the
Yeah.
kayaks and the mountain bikes and whatnot. So what they do is their overall housing strategy incorporates self-storage. So where a few years back, only about 9%, 8 or 9% of households in the country were using self-storage. Now it's like 12%. I know
Mhm.
that doesn't sound like a huge shift, but
That's a big
there's
growth.
there's 1.2 there's 120 million households in the country, so every 1% move is a 1.2 million new self-storage customers, and and there's only so many self-storage facilities around the country, and a lot of municipalities don't like self-storage, so they're not able to keep up with the development on the supply side. So we have increasing demand and kind of flat to slightly increasing supply, which Econ 101, right? It means that we're going to have pretty solid occupancy and able to push rates in most markets. So,
Yeah, same thing that we've seen. It's like all those people living in those micro studios, like where are they gonna put their stuff, right? They have to have storage. It's just a lifestyle shift and keeping up
yeah.
with that. And mobile home parks and RV parks also some similar problems.
Yeah.
Even in rural areas, we've been traveling around in our RV now for I don't know a couple of months, and we were driving through one area in rural Florida, and there were all these billboards everywhere, like "Stop the RV park," and I'm like, "This is literally the middle of nowhere." What is an RV park hurting around here from a development,
Right.
standpoint? But, it's difficult to get storage, mobile home parks, RV parks,
Yeah.
short-term rentals, build to rent neighborhoods. People who make the decisions around here are still a McMansion, single family zoning
That's
type
right,
of
that's right. Meanwhile,
yeah,
we have an affordable housing crisis, right,
yeah,
across the country and it's not new. It's been
yeah,
there for a long, long time, but we can't get out of our own way to solve it because these NIMBY people, right, they're not in my backyard people, and
mhm,
so, yeah,
yeah,
it's a lingering problem, but, creates opportunities for
mhm,
investors. A big fan of mobile home parks myself as far as when I have my investor hat on. And yeah, so the entrepreneurs, right? We find those imbalances, those niches, those problems, and we go and we figure out a way to make money
yeah,
doing it.
yeah, and I don't know if you've seen this, but just like the sustainability of a project and its impact on environmental concerns is another niche that I'm finding is becoming more open because like we recognize we need more development to have smaller housing, to have more housing density, right? We need self-storage so they have a place to put their kayaks, right? And being able to do that in an ecologically sustainable way is becoming
Right.
a niche that we need to focus on. And you're like, I've always felt guilty about storage, honestly, because I feel like it's like when you are having a garage sale and a hoarder comes to your garage sale and buys your stuff. And so I always feel like if I offered self-storage, it's just like encouraging people to overconsume and have excess. But
Yeah.
when we started working on those downtown apartments, I realized this is a vital service so that people can live closer together. They can live smaller. They can have a smaller footprint. They just need this little bit of extra space to be able to store
Right.
stuff that they're actually using. I thought, "Oh, it's a place where stuff goes to die," right? And sometimes it
Right.
is, but I changed my mindset about it,
Hmm.
a few years ago. Have you thought about that? I mean, is that something that you wonder, like, how well are we serving our clients?
Sure. I guess it's kind of human nature, especially like as baby boomers are aging and retiring and
Mhm.
selling their big McMansion. And they're convinced, right, that one of their kids or their grandkids or somebody's gonna want that bedroom set. And God forbid they throw it out or give it away or whatever. They want to hold on to it because somebody's gonna want it, but nobody's gonna want it. And so yeah, we recognize that and we recognize that we are in a hyper consumer kind of economy, right? And that's one of the things we actually look at when we're figuring out where we think the self storage industry is going.
Mhm.
We look at consumer spending Because people, it's so easy, right? You just go on your phone and click, click, click. You can buy whatever you want on Amazon, whether you have room for it in your house or not. So I guess it's an unfortunate reality. I guess the one thing that we are able to do is that when we do have a unit that needs to be cleaned out, is we don't just chuck in the dumpster. We
Mhm,
take time in that community to donate what seems to be donatable. Some stuff is
mhm.
just trash. It just is, but other things could be used and dropped off at the local Goodwill or VA or whatever our local manager can find in terms of a group or an agency or situation that might be able to take advantage of this leftover stuff that nobody seems to want.
Yeah. I would used to be a real estate photographer, and I was doing photos for a house one day, and the woman, she's like, "Oh, I'm so sad to be moving. This house is 7 bedrooms and a really compact floor plan. It's very efficient." And she's like, "But we're empty nesters, and we have all this stuff that we inherited from my mom." And it was beautiful. Every room was decked out with basically vintage and antique furniture that she'd
Right.
inherited. And she's like, "Nobody wants it. And we're holding this entire 7-bedroom house as empty nesters so we can hang on to all of this vintage furniture that's
Right.
gorgeous, but I just can't justify it
Yeah.
anymore." And so she sold all her stuff and downsized, and there were a few really sentimental pieces that she's like, "We'll just put it in storage." And there was a lot of value, and there was, like, a valuable thing that she's
Yeah.
putting in there, and that was like, "Huh, okay, yeah, you gotta kinda rethink, like, how you're choosing to live." And so it was cheaper for her to put some of the most valuable, not the most special
Mhm.
pieces into storage and live in a different house, and that was kinda when I started, like, putting the dots
Yeah.
together there. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a client, what do you call it, a product market fit there that we really do need to take into consideration. So back us up a little bit into the projects that you're working on right now
Sure.
and speak to investors about investing in self-storage, because this podcast sometimes can get a little heavy on the business side of things for people who are like, "I don't want to start a self-storage side hustle. I want
Right.
to
Right.
work my job that I'm good at and make a lot of money at,
Right.
and my
Yeah.
401k is maxed out, and I have extra money. I'm not gonna be able to
Mhm.
retire well, even with the maxed out, retirement accounts, and I need to place this capital somewhere so I can maintain my standard of living when I retire. And hopefully, I retire at 55 or 60 instead of 65." That's the person that is really
Right.
wanting the passive income adventure side of the show. So speak to them a little bit from to an investor standpoint rather than, "Oh, here's how you go start your own self-storage hustle."
Yeah. Right.
How do you
Yeah.
invest in these things? And it's like, how can you tell a good deal from a bad deal? Because that's really what they wanna know.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a great question, Emma, because we do have a number of people reach out to us saying, "Hey, I saw this storage facility for sale near where I live, and yeah, I'm thinking of buying it." And so we kind of we plant some subliminal messages with it, but we encourage like, "Hey, yeah, go check it out." And then when you buy it, you're gonna have to sign for this debt, and you're gonna have to do that, and you're gonna have to get this software in place, and you're gonna have to really analyze your market, figure out what are your competitors charging, blah, blah, blah. And so a lot of times by the end of the conversation, they're like, yeah, maybe I'll just invest with you guys instead.
Out there that storage is a passive income source. It is not. It is a
Yeah.
business, and it may
Yeah.
be a less time intensive business than some other businesses. There's
That's
a
right.
spectrum there. But passive, it is not passive, and I wanna quash that
Yeah,
myth.
if you're a self-storage owner operator, no, there's a lot to it, especially if you're gonna do it well. And guess what? If you don't do it well, we're gonna come along and buy your facility
Yeah.
for less than its potential, right? And
Yes.
then we're gonna buy it from you, and we're gonna go and do our value add thing with our sophisticated technology platform and our world-class operations team, and we're gonna increase the value at that thing, and you're gonna say, "Oh, wow, I couldn't do that." But anyway, so as far as an investor, put my investor hat on, yeah, I mean, there's certainly some key things that you need to look out for. And I would encourage folks to go to our website, belrosestoragegroup.com, and pick up our ebook that we call the SAFE investing method. And so SAFE is an acronym, SAFE. S stands for sponsor, A stands for asset, F stands for financials, and E stands for exit. And this ebook kind of evolved over time just from the mistakes that I
Yeah.
made over the years, things I wish I had asked, because I do invest passively in other people's deals as an LP. And so there are things that I wish I had asked or known before getting involved in a particular deal. So basically, it's a due diligence framework to just try to help a W 2 person or maybe somebody that's busy doing something else, just give them a framework to get started in analyzing whether it's a mobile home park deal, a multifamily deal, self storage deal, whatever. And so it just gives that framework to hopefully help them just take that first step towards getting into alternative investments, which for me is like, has been really life changing. And I just encourage everyone out there to do that for themselves. But S again stands for sponsor. One big mistake I see investors make is they skip right past the sponsor and they just start looking at the asset. Is it an apartment or self-storage facility or whatever? You really need to know who you're doing business with, right? So the sponsor is super important. What's their track record? How long have they been doing this? Is it just a somebody with a name at gmail.com? Is that their company? Or do they actually have a team of people that are industry experts and thought leaders and really involved in the industry so that you can, that's a huge way to reduce your risk, right? Is knowing who you're doing business with. We have a 9-figure investor that has been with us for years, 9 figures, meaning his net worth is over $100 million. I think it's well over $100 million. But anyway, he came to us years ago and he said the biggest risk, because he does a lot of alternative investing and different
Mhm.
asset classes and whatnot. He said the biggest risk is that trust with the sponsor. And he's like, you guys check that box. So I'll look at whatever deal you put in front of me. I might not say yes, but
Mhm.
that first big issue is off the table. I trust you guys. I know you guys. I know you're, even if
Mhm.
a deal does go wrong, I know it's not because of something squirrely that you guys did, because I've gotten to know you and trust you over the years, kind of thing.
Mhm.
So definitely look at the sponsor. A is for asset. A lot of people, it seems like they don't really understand exactly what it is they're investing
Yeah.
in. No, like I know digital assets are huge right now, right? Like Bitcoin and Cardano and Doge, all these. It's like, okay, so what is it exactly that you're investing in? And do you understand it? Like, can you explain it to your mother or your small child, like what it is you're investing in?
I bought it exactly as much crypto as I understood what was going on, which was
Right.
about 2% of my net worth because I understood about 2% of what blockchain is. And so
Yeah,
I'm like,
there,
I'll buy about that much as I get.
right. Yeah,
And
there
it
you
was a
go.
hard doing thing because I don't really get it.
Yeah, me neither. I do have some investments because I have a friend that I trust, and I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
well, tell me a little bit about it. And then, and like you said, you put in what we would call risk capital, right? So if you lose 2% of your net worth, it's not going to crater your whole life, right? So that's a good way to approach something that you're just learning about, right? Is
Yeah.
just kind of dip a toe sort of thing. But if you're investing with us in a self storage deal, you're buying membership interests in an LLC, so you become a part owner of the LLC that owns the
Mhm.
self-storage facility, owns the land and owns the business that sits on top of the land. So that I think helps people to understand that they are becoming a business owner, right? And businesses have revenue and expenses, and we monitor all those things. And that leads us to F, which is the financials. Do you
Mhm.
understand the financials? Like we talked about a little earlier, the operating expense ratio, right? What
Yep.
does that look like? And has the sponsor hit these kinds of projections in the past, right? And what's their track record in terms of that? What are the tax implications, right? And those kinds of things. There's a whole list of questions about the financials. And then E finally is for exit. How do you get out of this thing?
Yeah.
Right? It's not like you can go to schwab.com and click, click, click and sell your position, in a
Mhm.
multifamily deal or a mobile home park deal or a self-storage deal. It just doesn't work that way. So you need to go in eyes wide open, understanding how long is your money going to be tied up for? Maybe it's only 2 years, but it could be 5, 7, 10 years if it's like a development deal. So you need to understand that and be comfortable with that as an investor. And again, you need to go, it goes back to the sponsor. Has the sponsor executed on that type of exit strategy before in that time frame and generated those kinds of returns? So again, ebook on our website outlines all these kinds of questions, but I think it's just, it helps to give someone a place to start, right? And break that inertia and get them going, looking at deals. And if you're going through the questions, something doesn't sound right, smell right, look right, whatever, just say no and just move on to the next deal. Because guess what? There
Or
are a
more.
ton of deals out there for you to be looking at as an investor.
A lot of people looking for a lot of capital. So it's tempting almost to become too picky at times. I have people who come by and they'll look at deal after deal after deal after deal, and they're looking for a home run. And what we're looking for is a series of base hits. So we're going to use a sports analogy here. I used to watch a ton of baseball when I was a kid with my little brother. And I would look at the stats that they're putting on the screen during the game. And it has like base hits, runs, and home runs, and then errors. And I didn't know what a baseball error what like, how do you get that, right? And as I came to understand more about the sport, like, this has really stuck with me because even the best players, what's their batting average, right? Like
Yeah. 300.
400? like, for an amazing and I realized, like, okay, so their errors that they're committing, it's like, what I miss Michael Jordan missed more shots than he made, and I'm recognizing, like, this error rate of saying, "This is an actual mistake that this person made." It wasn't just like, I missed, like, I made an actual mistake, and recognizing that, and it's stuck with me. It's like, I'm just trying to get my runs, my successes to outweigh the errors, and that really describes a lot of the way that I invest, and you said something that really hit that. It's like the guy trusts you. He knows you're not incompetent and he knows you're not shady,
Mhm.
but he knows also that even with all of that in place, some deals can go wrong. And to me, that's like the healthiest place to be as an investor. Find someone you trust,
Right.
competent, honest, and then give them a little bit of grace because they're so much out of our control. That's the kind of operator that you're looking for. And you said the same thing, like you got into a little bit of crypto because you found a guy that you trusted. I don't know
Right.
that much about it, but he does. So I'm going to throw a little risk capital at him and see
Mhm.
how it goes. I mean, can you put that in a book right there? Like how to cultivate that attitude and that mindset toward investing?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, for sure. It does take work, right? I mean, we're trying to be passive investors, right? And get our passive income more than our monthly expenses and all
Yep.
that stuff to get out of the rat race. But passive is, is not super passive.
Yeah.
Especially
Not
if you want to go
sleeping.
buy some bonds and make 5% or whatever, it's like, okay, you can do that. But if you're looking to get more out of the same amount of money, you're gonna have to put some work in. And so, for example, right, you've probably heard of the Best Ever conference, right? It's coming
Yep.
up
I'll be there. Are you
in
going to
a
be there?
I'm not.
Oh,
I wanna
you just
go
last
so
minute.
badly, but I kinda have to pick and choose where I go because the week before it, I'm gonna be speaking actually at the Inside Self Storage World
Mm-hmm.
Expo in Las Vegas,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't go, like, from
Yeah.
one just
Yes.
directly to the other one, so I'm really torn. But anyway, so that event, right? I mean, there are investors that they spend the money to
To
go
attract.
to that type of event because there's going to be sponsors there, other investors, different service providers. So it's just
Mhm.
a place to go and really and learn. And that's hugely important. And that's not passive. That's very active. You get flying
Go
to
on.
Utah is a very active kind of thing and spending the money because it's not inexpensive to go to Best Ever conference. But it's important if you're looking at building your wealth over the long haul, that's a way to get in front of the right people that you can learn from and invest with and help to reach your financial goals.
Yeah, yeah, I think I'm just gonna be lobby surfing on this one because it was so last minute that we decided to go, and I
Oh,
don't
okay.
I'm there to network. So we're sponsoring our Rise Capital is sponsoring an event off-site that I wanna
Okay.
be at, but it's so last minute because 'cause we're here for the eclipse, the solar eclipse. Our kids are actually driving from Salt Lake City to Texas
Oh.
to watch the solar eclipse, and you can see all the little gift
Oh,
packs back
wow.
here for our tenants with the little
Okay.
glasses and everything. We're having a big
Cool.
viewing party. It literally goes right over this RV park that we
Oh,
bought.
fun.
And I'm like, "How am I
Awesome.
supposed to get from Texas to Utah in time for to be able to do both of these things?"
Mhm.
I got all my adult kids are coming down, and so we're like,
Yep.
"We're just gonna drive back." Like, they're gonna drive down in one of our extra cars. We're gonna drive back, stay with them. It was just
Right.
so last minute.
Right,
So,
right.
it's gonna be fun, but I really feel like best ever, and one of the reasons I want to some of my partners actually bought tickets and are attending, and I'm just kind of a tag along at the last minute. But what they're doing so well is they're putting on things that are attracting passive investors who are hungry to know more, but don't know where to go because
Yeah.
they don't have a place where they can go where the information is curated in an easy, quick to digest manner. And we put out
Yeah.
lots of lead magnets, we put out lots of information, but to just have something where, like with your safe, oh my, that's brilliant. Like that's a brilliant acronym. It, I want to steal it so bad, but
Yeah.
yeah, to sit down with it and say like, "Imma read this book, and now I know what questions to ask and be able and but now where do I find the
Right.
deals?" And so,
Yeah.
it's a matter of networking, and it's how we find our deals is networking, the stuff falls out of the trees, and it's kinda unorganized, and so being able to go to a place around a lot of people with a lot of content where they can just
Yep.
have a one-stop shop. There's some in the time that needs to be invested upfront to be a passive investor. This is not
Yep.
as set it and forget it as, like, just maxing out your 401k. So,
That's right.
that's the message that I want investors to really understand. So, tell me, and I know this is not your specialty,
Mm.
but you made a comment that they're buying a piece of a business, they are partners in a business, limited partners in a business. I mean, they're shielded from liability, they're shielded from losing more than their
Right.
investment.
That's right.
But what's the difference between that and like a real estate investment trust, where that trust
Mm.
is aren't they buying stock in a business? And how's that different than what we're doing buying shares in this LLC business that's backed by real estate?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And if someone goes to their regular financial advisor, right, and they say, "Hey, I'm hearing about real estate and self storage, and I want to get involved. What should I do?"
Mhm.
The
I have a
financial
REIT for
advisor is going
you.
to say, "Yeah, I got a read for you. You know, hey, public storage or extra space or whatever. Yeah, you can
Mhm.
allocate to that." Well, problem with that is, as we learned back in the Great Financial Crisis, is everything back then was correlated, right? So meaning when one thing went down, everything went down. So
Mhm.
people invest in real estate to hedge against the volatility of the public markets. So if you're investing in a REIT, which is publicly traded,
Yeah.
when the market goes down, that REIT's going down. And
Yeah.
so, and in addition to that, you're typically buying what we would call like you're buying into a stabilized asset, which
Mhm.
was probably only going to be like maybe a 5 or 6% kind of return, maybe
Mhm.
10% if you're lucky, kind of thing. And so it just doesn't accomplish what someone's trying to accomplish
Mm.
when they say, "Hey, I want to get involved in real estate, or I want to get involved in storage
Yeah.
specifically, or apartments, or what have you." So finding that sponsor, going to a best ever conference or listening to podcasts and finding sponsors, because
And
guess what?
investing with us, investing
Yeah,
with you, Tom, investing with
right.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. And guess what? You don't need 20 sponsors, right? That you got that like and trust. You might
Mhm.
need like 3 or 4, right? So like I have a multifamily apartment guy that I've gotten to know. Been doing deals for 10, 15
Mhm.
years at this point. He's my apartment guy, right? I've got a mobile home park guy. I'm my own self-storage guy.
Yeah.
But that being said, right? I can't invest in my own deals through my self-directed IRA, but I still want to be in storage through my self-directed IRA. So I do have a self-storage guy that I invest with who I've gotten to know
Mhm.
over the years. We're in the same mastermind group. And then I have other people who I trust as a lender. So I do some lending out of my,
Mhm.
regular money and also my self-directed money. And I have like three trusted people. So what is that? One, two, three, four, five. So I have like 5 or 6
And your crypto guy.
trusted operators. Huh?
And your crypto guy, we can't forget about him.
And my crypto guy, right. So, but these are people I've gotten to know over the years. I know them personally. I can pick up the phone and call them. It's not some person behind some curtain, right? I mean, good luck trying to call Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, if you have a question about Apple
Yeah.
stock or the Apple
Yeah.
Corporation.
How's Apple
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah, right. I mean, how do you even analyze that company? It's like global and huge. It's no idea.
Yeah.
But I
I mean,
could tell
yeah.
you how to analyze a self-storage facility. We look at the market, we look at the
Mhm.
revenue, look at the expenses, look at the unit mix, look at blah, blah, blah. So I can walk anybody through that whole analysis and help them out that way. But yeah, you don't need a gazillion different sponsors to know, like, and trust. You just need a trusted handful, and then you'll be good to go.
Yep. Hyper diversification. I've interviewed some people on the show several times, and a lot of investors that we're talking about hyper diversification, never investing more than a certain amount of money with any one operator, any one asset class, and they have a lot of investments. It's a large portfolio, but each one is like this little micro thing. Is really born of a place of a scarcity mindset because they're so afraid to lose money. Because Warren Buffett
Mm-hmm.
said, "Rule one, don't lose money. Rule two, don't lose money."
Forget the
They've
one.
lost money. They've lost money playing Alibaba. Come to mind, right? Like
Yeah,
it
right.
it it puts up
Yeah,
this almost false expectation that you're so afraid of losing money that you're gonna hyper diversify, and then it becomes like this job just to find and maintain the portfolio.
yeah,
So I love what you're saying about find your 3, your 6 guys, on the high end, maybe 10, and spread it around. We just wanna be one of those guys. I mean, honestly, like, that's what it breaks
right.
down to. It's like, we wanna be one of your people that you turn to
Th-
when you're
That's
looking
right.
to invest in the kinds of things that we invest in. And the difference the pros of a REIT, much more liquid, right?
Totally. Yeah,
There's no E on that one. There's no exit. Like, you
that's right.
just
Yeah, yeah.
click
That's where you
your
click,
button.
click, click, and you can buy and sell, no problem.
Yeah. And so in exchange for that liquidity, you're gonna pay in returns, in the performance. And in exchange for that liquidity, you're gonna pay in terms of higher volatility. Because if somebody can sell because they feel like it, that's why it's all over the place. And so the
Right.
downsides of it are, granted, with the real estate that we're doing, it is less liquid. And so the prices are more stable. You don't panic sell 200 unit storage
Right.
in a storage facility. It just doesn't work that way, and so I feel like there are a lot of trade-offs, a lot of pros and cons between the 2, but I think for me, the biggest one is that the LLC that they're buying shares into with us, it is actually holds the real estate versus the
Mhm.
REIT. those properties are held in different LLCs, and you're buying shares into the top level, the holding company,
That's
not
right.
the one that holds the properties. And so to me, it's like it's not actually backed by real estate. It it's a company that buys
Right.
real estate. There's a big difference.
Right.
And I think that sometimes that gets a little conflated. People don't quite people don't quite get it. So I appreciate you walking us down that road and explaining that a little bit more. I mean, even my husband recently, he was like, "Why aren't we invested in REITs?" And I was like, "You read an article, didn't you?"
Right. Yeah.
You
Don't
gotta
do
be
that.
aware of both sides. Is it a good
Yeah.
fit for some people? Yes. Will I
Yeah.
never invest in a REIT? Like, maybe someday I will. It's just really important to understand, like, what we're getting and the
Absolutely.
trade-offs of each thing. So, I mean, some
Yep.
people find a trade a big pro in hyper diversification. They're willing to trade all that management time of finding and managing because they really need to know that they're if they do lose any money, it's just teeny tiny little amounts. For me, it's not worth the trade-off. And for most of the investors that we're working with, they don't. They want to set it and forget it.
Yeah. 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 Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. So, is there anything that you want to tell us about your business that I haven't asked that you want to make sure that we know?
Oh, wow. Well, we do have a team here. You know, it's not just the Tom and Joe show.
Yeah.
We've got a whole acquisitions team that's out there shaking bushes and scouring the landscape for good real estate deal, good self storage deals. We actually use offshore virtual assistants to help out with that process, and then we have a whole onshore team. And then once we get a deal that looks like it pencils out, it gets kicked over to my team, and I do all the capital raising. So I arrange for the debt financing, and then I raise the equity. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we invest in our own deals as well. And then once we buy it, then it gets kicked over to our operations team, and they implement our value add strategies using our technology platform and just our overall kind of smarts and philosophy that we've learned and implemented over the years. Yeah, and then we just kind of run that out and we're able to generate some great returns for our investors. But we're really kind of a very value driven operation, very purpose driven. You'd asked me earlier about mission, and I never got around to answering that, but
Oh, it's
our
the
mission
perfect
really
time
is
for it.
yeah, our mission really is, Emma, to just have a positive impact on people, help them create better lives for themselves and their families and their loved ones through investing in real estate. And when I started in real estate in 2006, I really had no idea like the power of this kind of investing could have. So over the years, I've been able to help many friends and family members just get started with it and in alternative investments and now in self storage. And they oftentimes just really thank me. In fact, this past Thanksgiving, I got a text message, a close friend of mine who I just sort of mentored over the years. He's younger than me and helped him out with his business. And he just texted me on Thanksgiving, just saying, I thank God that you're in my life and you've been such a great friend and mentor over the years. So, I mean, those are the kinds of messages that you just love to get and you can't place a value on that, right?
Yeah.
Especially now where I'm at, right? I'm about to be 56 years old. I've learned a lot. I've been doing this 18 years. That is the kind of satisfaction and fulfillment and impact that I'm looking to have. So if there's somebody out there and maybe they don't care about self-storage at all or whatever, hey, I'm an open book. I'm happy to talk to anybody about whatever it is they're encountering in their investing career because I just want to share what I've learned, the mistakes I've made, and I've done some good things along the way too, but I just want to have that giving back and just so that it can create that ripple effect and just have people have better lives through investing in real estate.
No, that's what people say. That's what people mean when they say, I don't ever want to retire. It's again, we don't want to be in
Right.
a cubicle W-2 9 to 5 until we're 65. But at the same time, we want purpose and mission. And what you just
Mhm.
described there, I really enjoy helping people build wealth. And at the beginning of this journey, that is one thing that's really surprised me because I did not have that commitment early on. I felt like helping
Mhm.
the rich get richer is what it felt like to
Mhm.
me. Then what I
Yeah.
realized is the more people that we helped build wealth, the more they started talking about volunteering, the more they started talking about giving it back, the more they started talking about
Mhm.
ripple effect and paying it forward. And I thought, wait a second, like we're creating this whole group of people who can not only care for themselves better,
Mhm.
their families better, but even outside of that, their umbrella of people they can care for just grows as they build wealth. And I
Yeah.
found that to be extremely rewarding over the last few years. And that is something that did definitely surprise me about this journey of helping other people invest in our projects. Have you found
Yeah.
the same thing?
Yeah, totally. I mean, when I first started out, it was all about, hey, I got to provide for my family and grow for, myself and my, loved ones. But as I learned more and grew more and started meeting more and more people, just sharing, I just realized that, hey, you really can have an amazing impact and those ripple effects are real. So for example, I had a close friend passed away from ALS, a close friend of mine from business school and horrible, like evil disease. And so when she told me that she had been diagnosed with this, I said, hey, we've got to do something because she was just such an amazing person. I went to William and Mary for business school. She went there for business school, but also undergrad. She was like a cheerleader and all this. So she was like Miss William and Mary. And so while she was still with us, I seeded a scholarship in her honor, in her name. And sorry, I get a little choked up. But now we've raised some money. We've got that scholarship going, and now it's actually paying out to students, which I think is really cool. And again, it's a ripple effect. Like one of those students might go on to build some great company and create a ton of jobs and create these opportunities for their people to build wealth and be able to give back. So I
Yeah.
think it's really cool.
Yeah. And one of those people, as we get into that web of network, might find a cure for ALS. You just never
Yeah,
know, like,
right. Yeah,
where
that
this
would be
one goes.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so normally I ask everybody how to get a hold of you, but more importantly, why they should get a hold of you and describe like the perfect, your ideal that would get it. But I think you just answered. I think you just answered. No. If you want to build wealth
Sure.
because you want to help others build wealth and you want to help care for others who need
Mhm.
help, like that's the kind of person that we want to reach out after the show to us. You're making me get emotional. So
Yeah.
share with people how to get a hold of you after the show.
Sure. Yeah. And this has been great. Thank you so much. I'm sorry if my answers were super long, but I'm getting old. So
Oh,
I get very
I love it
long
that way.
winded.
This is a long form podcast, so people know what to expect.
Um,
They're gonna get the nitty-gritty and the details here, so
Yeah,
sure.
but no, this has been great. Thank you so much. I'm Tom Dunkel. I'm the Chief Investment Officer here at Bel Rose Storage Group. And my phone number is here on the screen. You can go to belrosestoragegroup.com. You can Google my name and you can find other podcast episodes. If you happen to be out in Las Vegas in the beginning of April, you can come see me speak at the Inside Self Storage World Expo. But if you just want to catch up on the phone, just talk about how do you get started in alternative investing. Maybe you don't like self storage, that's fine. I'm happy to just share things I've learned over the years and just try to encourage people to take that step forward to getting involved in alternative investments because I think it can be very life changing. But yeah, I'm an open book. Happy to talk to you about investing. I'm also a golfer. If you want to share some golf stories, I play guitar in a rock and roll band. If you want to talk about guitar, so
Oh, wait,
uh,
I wanted to talk about guitars. I did not I did that was
yeah,
didn't ask about the hobbies. I should have, because now we could talk about guitars for another half hour,
yeah.
so sorry.
Yeah, so yeah, just happy to get on the phone and just chat up about whatever you'd like to talk about. Raising
Awesome.
kids. My kids are 21 and 19, so they're like empty nesters out in the world. I'm an empty nester. They're out in the world doing their thing. You can see my son over my shoulder here. He's about to be commissioned as a Navy officer when he graduates from college here in about a month or so.
Nice,
So
congratulations. Well,
thank you.
for the people who are not watching this on YouTube and are listening to it, can you read out your phone number for 'em?
Sure. Yeah. It's Tom Dunkel, Dunkel. And my phone number is 610-761-8940. And it's Bel Rose Storage Group, BELROSE, only one L, belrosestoragegroup.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate you sharing, being vulnerable, and there's so much more that we could talk about. You have a lot of experience and a lot of great stories. So we'll have to have you back on in a couple of months or next year and
Yeah.
get an update and hear more stories. So really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for listening.
Yep.
Be sure to reach out after the show. You can get a hold of us at partnerwithrise.com. That's where to have a conversation, like get the relationship started, because that trust is really the most important thing that we're doing. And if you want to learn how to nitpick over deals, get together at our weekly club meeting, which is at riseclubcapital.com. Tom, if you have a deal that you can share with our club, looking for investors, or you just want to teach us how to underwrite self storage, like we'd love to have you on as a guest on the club as well and get into the
Sure.
nerdy
Yeah, I'd
spreadsheet.
love that. That's a great idea. It's a great
Awesome. All right.
resource.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like there's a lot of deal flow in there, but also it's like learning how to dive in and those questions of the F in your safe, like the financial part. We really do focus pretty heavily on that because I feel like that builds more confidence for people who can start to get their head wrapped around that and be able to say, like, I can do this. So appreciate being on the show, Tom, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks. This is great.
Until next time, everyone.